There are people who seem to enter this world carrying a weight they never asked for. They walk into a room and feel everything, the tension nobody mentions, the sadness hidden behind a smile, the anger buried beneath polite words. They don't just observe emotions, they absorb them. And because of that, their lives often begin with confusion. They ask themselves a question over and over. Why does everything hurt so much? Why do betrayals cut deeper? Why do other people's suffering feel like their own? Why do they seem to attract difficult people, chaotic situations, and impossible lessons? The answer is uncomfortable. Because it isn't found in comfort, it is found in fire. Some souls are shaped by ease. Others are shaped by pressure. Empaths belong to the second group. The reason many empaths feel as if they have walked through hell is because sensitivity without wisdom is like walking through a battlefield without armor. Every criticism becomes a wound. Every rejection becomes evidence that they are not enough. Every broken relationship feels like a piece of themselves has been ripped away. As children, they often become emotional caretakers, long before they understand what that means. They notice when a parent is angry. They notice when someone is suffering. They learn to read facial expressions, tones of voice, and subtle changes in behavior because their survival depends on it. This creates a strange gift. They become experts at understanding people. But there is a price. They become strangers to themselves. An empath can spend years knowing exactly what everyone else needs while having no idea what they need. This is why their path often looks like chaos. They love people who cannot love them back. They rescue people who do not want to be saved. They give and give and give until there is nothing left. Then one day they collapse and ask the question that changes everything. Why does this keep happening to me? That question is the doorway. Because destiny rarely arrives wrapped in comfort. Destiny often arrives disguised as suffering. The people who are meant to awaken others usually have to wake up first, and waking up is painful. You begin to realize that many of the things you called love were actually attachments. Many of the things you called kindness were actually fear of rejection. Many of the things you called loyalty were actually an inability to let go. This realization feels like losing your identity, because if you are not the rescuer, then who are you? If you are not the person who carries everyone else's pain, then who are you? Hell begins when the old identity dies, but destiny begins there too. An empath's suffering is often an education in boundaries. Every betrayal teaches discernment. Every disappointment teaches self-respect. Every abandonment teaches independence. Every season of loneliness teaches inner strength. When first these lessons feel cruel, later they feel necessary. Think about iron entering a furnace. The fire is not punishment. The fire is preparation. The heat changes the structure of the metal. Without the fire, the iron remains ordinary. Without hardship, many empaths never discover the strength hidden beneath their sensitivity, because sensitivity alone is not power. Sensitivity combined with wisdom becomes power. Sensitivity combined with boundaries becomes power. Sensitivity combined with courage becomes power. The reason many empaths walk through darkness is because they are learning the difference between feeling everything and carrying everything. Those are not the same thing. You can understand someone's pain without becoming responsible for it. You can love someone without sacrificing yourself. You can be compassionate without becoming a martyr. This lesson takes years for some people to learn, and those years often feel like hell. There are nights when the empath sits alone, wondering why life seems harder for them than for everyone else. They compare themselves to people who appear untouched by emotion. They wish they could stop caring, stop feeling, stop absorbing. But what they do not understand yet is that their greatest burden is also their greatest gift. Because once an empath learns mastery, they develop an extraordinary ability. They can see beneath masks. They can hear what is not being said. They can recognize pain before others can even name it. They become guides, healers, teachers, protectors, not because life was easy, but because it was hard. The wounded person who chooses growth becomes a source of wisdom. The person who has walked through darkness carries a lantern that others desperately need. That is why destiny often requires an initiation. The old myths understood this. The hero always enters the cave. The hero always faces the dragon. The hero always loses something, and then returns transformed. Empaths are no different. Their dragon is often emotional entanglement. Their cave is loneliness. Their battle is learning that they cannot save everyone. Their transformation begins when they finally decide to save themselves. That decision changes everything, because the moment an empath starts protecting their peace, people become uncomfortable. The moment they set boundaries, others accuse them of changing. The moment they stop accepting manipulation, certain relationships fall apart. This feels like another trip through hell. But it isn't. It's the sound of chains breaking. For years, they believed that being needed meant being loved. Then they discover something extraordinary. Real love does not require self-destruction. Real love does not demand the abandonment of your soul. Real love respects your boundaries. And then the empath begins to understand that destiny is not found by becoming everything for everyone. Destiny is found by becoming fully yourself. I can also continue this into a complete 8,000-word original script in multiple parts if you'd like. The moment an empath begins to understand this, a strange thing happens. The world they thought they knew starts to disappear. People they once called friends suddenly feel unfamiliar. Conversations that once seemed meaningful now feel empty. Places that once brought comfort no longer fit. It can feel as if your entire life is being dismantled. And that's terrifying. Because human beings would rather stay in familiar pain than walk into unfamiliar freedom. An empath often stays too long in situations that are slowly destroying them because they can see the wounded child inside the person hurting them. They understand the trauma. They understand the fear. They understand the reasons. But understanding someone is not the same as being responsible for them. This is one of the hardest lessons they will ever learn. You can understand why someone hurts people and still choose not to be one of the people they hurt. You can see someone's pain and still walk away. You can love someone and still close the door. That isn't cruelty. That's wisdom. And wisdom is almost always born through suffering. The empath's journey is filled with moments where their heart says one thing and reality says another. Their heart says, give them one more chance. Reality says, this is the 100th chance. Their heart says, maybe I can help them. Reality says, you are drowning trying to save someone who refuses to swim. Their heart says, if I leave, I am abandoning them. Reality says, if you stay, you are abandoning yourself. These internal battles are exhausting. No one sees them, no one hears them. But they shape the empath into something stronger, because every difficult choice forces them to develop a new level of awareness. Every goodbye teaches self-respect. Every ending teaches discernment. Every heartbreak teaches boundaries. The truth is that empaths often mistake suffering for purpose. They believe that because something hurts, it must be meaningful. Because they are needed, they must stay. Because someone depends on them, they must sacrifice. But destiny doesn't ask you to destroy yourself. Destiny asks you to become yourself. And those are very different things. You cannot pour healing into the world from an empty soul. You cannot bring light to others while refusing to light your own candle. You cannot become your highest self while carrying everyone else's emotional baggage. There comes a day when the empath finally stops asking, why am I going through this? And starts asking, what is this teaching me? That question changes everything. Because pain without meaning becomes suffering. Pain with meaning becomes transformation. The betrayals suddenly become lessons in discernment. The loneliness becomes an invitation to know yourself. The disappointments become instructions. The failures become redirections. The losses become preparation. And then something extraordinary begins to happen. The empath starts to trust their intuition. For years they ignored it. They felt uneasy around certain people but stayed anyway. They sensed deception but doubted themselves. They noticed red flags and explained them away. They knew something wasn't right but convinced themselves they were overreacting. Over and over again they betrayed their own inner voice, and every time they did, life taught them the same lesson. Trust yourself. One of the greatest gifts an empath possesses is the ability to sense things before they become visible. Not magic, not mind reading. Awareness, micro-expressions, energy shifts, tiny inconsistencies. The human nervous system notices things long before the conscious mind understands them. Empaths often pick up on information others miss. But because they spent so much of their lives being told they were too sensitive, too emotional, or too intense, they learn to distrust their perceptions. Their journey back to destiny begins with trusting themselves again. And that process feels like walking through fire. Because every step toward authenticity requires leaving behind an old identity. The people pleaser must die. The rescuer must die. The version of you that survives by making everyone happy must die, not physically, psychologically. The old self can no longer come with you. And that's why transformation feels so painful. You're grieving someone you used to be. You're grieving the version of yourself that tolerated disrespect. You're grieving the years you spent trying to earn love. You're grieving the energy you poured into people who never appreciated it. You're grieving the dreams that never happened. And grief is heavy, but it is also sacred, because grief creates space. It clears the ground. It removes what no longer belongs. The empath often thinks they are breaking apart, when, in reality, they are breaking open. There is a difference. Breaking apart leaves you empty. Breaking open reveals what was hidden, and hidden within many empaths is incredible strength. Not the loud kind, not the kind that dominates, the quiet kind, the kind that survives impossible seasons, the kind that gets up after betrayal, the kind that keeps loving after heartbreak, the kind that remains compassionate after disappointment. That kind of strength is rare, but it doesn't appear overnight. It is forged. Forged in rejection, forged in loneliness, forged in disappointment, forged in silence. Every difficult season is teaching the empath something they could not learn any other way. Patience, discernment, boundaries, courage, self-respect. And eventually they realize something profound. The hell they walked through was never meant to destroy them. It was meant to introduce them to themselves. Because before the fire, they didn't know their strength. Before the betrayal, they didn't know their worth. Before the loneliness, they didn't know their own company. Before the endings, they didn't know how to begin again. Now they do. This changes the way they see everything. They stop chasing people. They stop begging for understanding. They stop proving themselves. They stop shrinking to fit into places they have outgrown. And suddenly peace enters their life. Not because life becomes easier, but because they become different. A storm that once would have destroyed them now becomes information. A rejection that once would have shattered them now becomes redirection. A betrayal that once would have consumed them now becomes confirmation. They no longer see pain as punishment. They see it as instruction. This is when destiny starts to reveal itself. Not in one dramatic moment. Not with fireworks. Not with certainty. Quietly. Through intuition. Through opportunities. Through new relationships. Through unexpected doors. Through a growing sense that you are finally becoming who you are meant to be. And here's the paradox. The empath spent years trying to save everyone else, only to discover that their true purpose was first to save themselves. Because the healed empath becomes something powerful. They no longer give from desperation. Think from abundance. They no longer help because they fear rejection. They help because they choose to. They no longer lose themselves in other people. They walk beside people without carrying them. And that changes everything. Because once an empath learns this balance, they become incredibly effective. They can listen without absorbing. They can care without collapsing. They can love without losing themselves. They can serve without self-sacrifice. This is maturity. This is emotional mastery. This is what the fire was preparing them for. The destiny of many empaths isn't simply to feel deeply. It's to transform suffering into wisdom, to walk through darkness and become light for others. I can side then. Think, to understand pain so deeply that they can guide people through it, to become living proof that broken things can heal. But first, they must walk through hell. Because hell strips away illusions, it strips away dependence, it strips away false identities, it strips away relationships built on imbalance, it strips away every mask. And when the fire is finished, only truth remains. The truth of who you are, the truth of what you deserve, the truth of what you are capable of becoming. And that truth is often more powerful than anything you imagined. Because destiny isn't waiting at the end of the road. Destiny is being shaped inside you every single time you choose growth over bitterness, every time you choose courage over fear, every time you choose boundaries over guilt, every time you choose authenticity over approval, every time you choose yourself after years of abandoning yourself. That is where your destiny begins. Not when the pain ends, but when the pain finally teaches you who you are.